You see someone lazing around, never doing anything. That person really triggers you, and you really cannot have any compassion for them. That says more about you than it says about them. It feels like water is leaking out faster than you can refill it.
Yes. You literally articulated what I feel daily almost.
What exactly were you angry about?
I guess what I'm looking for is for you to defend and say, this is real, like this.
You want me to say this is a problem and you need to fix it and go to some anger management course?
Today's guest is a psychotherapist, an art therapist, and author who specializes in emotional intensity, giftedness, complex trauma, and personality disorders. Now, she founded Eggshell Therapy and Coaching after becoming frustrated with seeing intense people like me, being repeatedly misunderstood, marginalized, or described as having personality defects. Now, this is an open and raw conversation, so please help me welcome to the We Do Hard Things podcast, Imi Lo. A friend of mine, sent me your website because you had written an article. I was looking into, borderline personality disorder. I was looking into, you have articles on quiet versus, I guess more traditional. But you are one of the only people that I have been able to find or come across who specifically talked about the benefits of something like borderline personality disorder. And so what I wanted to kind of have a conversation around was just why is it that when we look at things like mental health conditions like depression or anxiety or bipolar or any of the personality disorders, why is it that so few people are able to get to a place or see maybe or speak about the benefits of it? Everybody's so focused on coming out and sharing their experience, but why aren't more people talking about, well, wait a minute, this isn't a life sentence. This isn't something that you have to slog through, but there's actually perhaps a beauty or even a superpower in having the way you're wired or the way that you think.
Yeah, well, this is something that I feel passionate about, and it's something that is a long-standing problem where the diagnosis borderline personality disorder has been called a kind of wastebasket diagnosis in the mental health system. And I've spotted how stigmatized it is in the system. Historically, it got a really bad name because of how volatile it is, and a lot of professionals don't really want to work with people with borderline personality disorders because it involves suicidality and it's very volatile. So a lot of people are afraid of it, and that's created a lot of misunderstanding. What it is when someone struggles to regulate with their emotions. And that can have many, many causes. Most likely than not, it comes from some kind of childhood trauma. So the last thing people with the label borderline personality disorders need is more gaslighting, more stigmatization, and more marginalizing them. They are already existing on the fringe of society. And actually, what they really need is more understanding of what has created this. My experience tells me that a lot of people who end up with the diagnosis are born emotionally sensitive and quite intense. Some of them may be really intelligent. So I am not saying that BPD is necessarily a gift in itself, but I am saying that a lot of people don't know that giftedness and BPD, let me put it this way, a lot of people who are emotionally gifted or they are actually intellectually gifted can be so intense that they either fall into the category of having the diagnosis, or they were purely just misunderstood and misdiagnosed as having a personality disorder. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense to me. And the reason why my friend sent me this is because for my own journey, I, like many of us, we have our baggage from our youth, and we have, family of origin and traumatic events and the way we navigate it. And I've always kind of known I've had anxiety, but I had a friend say, no, there's something else going on. He's known me for 15 years. There's something else here. You're up and you're down and you're up and you're down, and you snap at the drop of a hat, and you're never quite sure. Like I could never quite feel like I could grasp onto something and know the true version of me. Like I just wanted to know which version of me is the right version of me, and all of these things. And so I started looking. He said, "Oh, you're most likely bipolar," and I was raised with someone who had the manic side of the mania side, and would have long manic bouts and stuff. And I was like, that's not me. And then I found borderline personality disorder. I said, okay, I identify with 4 or 5 out of the 9, I guess, characteristics of it. But I'm not, showing up saying, hey, my name's Bill today. And I'm not screaming at people that I hate you and you're the worst, and then desperately saying, please don't leave me, come back. And so the reason why your article was so interesting to me was this idea of quiet borderline personality disorder. But again, it's the maybe it's not the superpower per se, but it's the I come from the world of entrepreneurship, and it's kind of known that if you grew up with dyslexia, you kind of, like a lot of entrepreneurs grew up with dyslexia, and they had learning strategies that made them play outside the system. And then suddenly they're able to do these amazing things. And so I was just saying, I don't know if I have quiet borderline personality disorder. And so I started therapy, and really they said, no, you just have GAD, it's just your GAD leads to depression, and then you cycle through and this and that. But again, I was so hungry or desperate to know, how can I take this thing that is a part of me and turn it into something beautiful or good? Or how can I have it serve me as opposed to just a crutch?
Really good question. When you say this thing, do you mean your anxiety or?
Well, now it's now I'm on the hunt. Originally, 2 months ago, I was thinking, okay, I have maybe some borderline personality disorder tendencies, let's say, or perfectionist traits, or these kind of things. And so I was on the hunt for how can I make this work? How can I not only cope, but how can I figure out the levers or the switches, or how can I own this and say, this is not something that's going to hold me back. And now I'm on the hunt with GAD because I only got the diagnosis 2 weeks ago. But now it's okay, how can you turn GAD into personality?
That's really interesting. One of my very close family members have GAD, and I'm definitely on the spectrum of being prone to anxiety, highly conscientious. I mean, I'm thinking about the big 5 personality traits: conscientiousness, nervousness, neuroticism. I'm very high on those. People like us are likely the ones who survive when the world go into an apocalyptic situation. And it may be that we have an evolutionary advantage. There are, what's the book? I need to find it. There's a book written about the upside of, without glorifying mental illnesses. The book talk about, what is it called? I'll find it and you can put it in the show notes. The upside of depression and the upside of anxiety. I think they have done research to say how people with anxiety actually can perform really high. That there's a curve where if you have moderate anxiety, you can perform really well. But of course, when it gets to too much, then it hinders you. Things are not in my brain now to kind of say it off the top of my head.
Oh, no, that's...
You have to trust that you are this way for a reason. And it could have been by nature. It could have been by nurture. And if it is by nurture, then at some point in your life, it has served you. Your trait is not your enemy. Maybe at some point in your life, you had to be this anxious, this careful, this vigilant in order to survive. And therefore, don't beat it up and don't think this is bad, I need to cure it. But rather say, well, thank you so much, anxiety, for helping me all these years. And I'm sure you've served me in this and this and this situation. Now, I'm a grown man. why don't you take a back seat and let me do the thing? Because I don't always need to be as anxious as I used to be. But of course, if there's some kind of strange situation, there's suddenly a tiger chasing you, you better be very anxious and run. But not too anxious that you become frozen, you know.
So this is now just me asking you a question, because you're in this field. So I don't need the full medical response, but I kind of feel like everybody's got something, right? Like we all got our baggage, we all have our trauma. You can't skate through life or get through life without having to face those hard things. So is it most likely that we all, like that every single person has some form of, I don't want to say mental illness, because my understanding is that that we, you know, anxiety is good until it becomes limiting. Being OCD is good until you become inflexible. Like there's these like safe zones, and then he's like, well, it's kind of hurting you now, and it's keeping you from achieving what you want to achieve. But do we not all have something? I mean, the more aware we become, I can't talk to someone without me saying like, oh, you know, I'm working through this, and they go, I have that, and it's just like, are we just trying to all label the emotions?
Brilliant question, really good question. Well, we started by talking about, well, the quick answer to that is yes. And the nuance is that everyone is on the spectrum somewhere based on your personality type and your experience. It's interesting that we started by talking about personality disorder. You know, the DSM people, the people who deal with the diagnostic menu, they are actually they are still trying, but it hasn't done it yet. They are trying to change the way they diagnose personality disorders. Rather than it being a tick boxing exercise or saying you either have it or you don't, they're trying to really bring home the message that it's a spectrum. And I believe we are all on the some kind, like, you know, some people are more tending to avoidance, and some people are more volatile. So they are all on the spectrum somewhere. You can say they're on the road to having that personality disorder when things go badly. The definition of a mental illness is when it becomes dysfunctional, that it hampers your day-to-day life. It really ruins your relationship. It stops you from going to work, and it really stops you from functioning. And when it comes to personality disorder, it has to be persistent, pervasive, and it has to be there for a sustained period of time for it to be diagnosed. So I think we are all definitely prone to something. Even the most well-balanced, healthy, psychologically healthy, resilient person, you know, he will be prone to having some kind of mental illness when the stressors go high enough. That's my belief, anyway.
I think that's remarkable. First of all, for us all to, I guess, recognize that's the truth. I've worried over the last. Well, I've worried for a long time. So I've known that I've had anxiety for a very long time. And now that it's like, oh yeah, now that I'm working through it and thinking back, it's like, maybe I should have dealt with this 15 or 20 years ago. But for me, I was not worried about the label. I was worried that I would be wrapping myself in victimhood, and I would use it as an excuse to not do the things that I need to do. And so I didn't want the label because I was so scared that I would just be like, well, now I don't have to get better because I have this thing that I can blame.
Do you think you then go all the other way to do the opposite?
Just to ignore it and fight it, perhaps.
Well, you've been a successful entrepreneur. You seem to have done a lot of things that's the opposite of shrinking and wrapping yourself up in the room.
Yeah, I mean, listen, some of us are very good at projecting who we want to be, and then behind closed doors. I mean, you know, 3 weeks ago.
You have to see me in my therapist's office.
I have to see you, or you mean I have to watch what you look like when you're speaking to your therapist?
No, you have to watch me being a client, then you will know how abnormal I am too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because since I guess we've moved into this new era that we're in now, you know, I would leave the house at 5 a.m. I would go to the gym, and then I'd get home at 6:30. And then, you know, I have a lot of kids, they were young, and then they would go off to bed at 7:30 or 8. And so there was just this really little window where I would actually spend time with them or see them. Now I spend all this time with them and I see them, and, you know, they're starting to see me for who I really am. Yeah. They're all getting older, and that terrifies me. Like it terrifies me to see in their eyes.
They are so penetrative as well, because they don't lie and they don't let anything escape.
I know. And that's why now it's an issue. Now we're forcing the issue, because I'm seeing the reflection of my actions and my behaviors in their eyes. So like, for example, maybe about a month and a half ago or something, my youngest daughter accidentally flipped her chair back into a china cabinet. So smashed.
How old is your daughter?
She's 6. You know, the dog was jumping on her lap. She was trying to push the dog off. The 4 kids were all eating lunch. She's the youngest. Anyway, she pushed it into a china cabinet. It's a 100-year-old china cabinet filled with china. So she broke the glass. All of the shelves came down, all of our dishware, all of our china, everything just came crashing down. And so when I got upstairs, like 10 seconds after this huge crash, you know, I assess the issue in a second. I scoop her up and I look at her and I'm like, okay, you're not bleeding or hurt. And I set her down. And then I just like freak out. I was just so angry. And so I yell at them all to get out of there. And I'm looking at this and I'm just like, oh my goodness, what do we do? And overwhelmed. And so it's like,
what do you think was underneath that anger?
I don't know. That's what I'm trying to figure out for myself, at least, you know, because I know that when I was younger, someone told me, or someone instilled in me, that it's better to take out your anger on something than someone. So I was just so angry. And so I grabbed one of my dining room chairs and I smashed it on the floor. And then I looked at it and I realized, like, I knew when I was doing it, like, I don't really care about this chair. I'm just going to go ahead and diffuse the situation for myself. But then now I'm looking at this going like, oh, now I need to explain to my kids why I smashed one of the dining room chairs on the floor, because they're like, wait a minute, the chair shouldn't be smashed when the china cabinet got smashed, right? And then, you know, like, and then I felt shame and I felt guilty and I felt terrible and I just cleaned it all up. And in the end, nothing was broken but a piece of glass. You know, it's like $25 to replace a piece of glass.
Your daughter was okay, right?
Pardon me?
Your daughter was okay?
Yes, everybody was fine. Everybody was fine. Nobody was hurt. Everything was fine. But now it's like, then I had to sit down with the kids, have a conversation with them. We still have it sitting there so I can stare at it and be like, yeah, I shouldn't get that angry. But you know, we're all dealing with something, and what
I really appreciate your honesty and vulnerability in sharing that story. I really do.
Well, I only share it for context because, yes, I'm a successful entrepreneur. But if you work for me, you'd realize that I'm very challenging to work for and with. And if you live with me, you'd know that I get angry really quickly and then diffuse very, very quickly. And if you know me as a friend, you'd realize that I kind of push people away. And so, like, I'm learning all these things about myself, and I think we all are, right? And what I can't figure out, and maybe therapy just is the answer, is like, how do you make sense of this? And then what actions do you take? Not to just try and suppress it, but again, like, I imagine if I took antidepressants or SSRIs, RI, there you go. There's the initials. I imagine if I did that, I would have some kind of outcome. But mostly, I don't think I can get rid of the anxiety. So how can we deal with it in a healthy way? And then again, just see the most amazing beauty in it, you know. And this is for any personality. This is for any personality thing. That's what I'm on the hunt for.
Absolutely. Well, there are many layers to that question. With my therapist's hat on, I would be so interested in knowing, what exactly were you angry about? Who were you really angry with? and what it has brought up for you on a deep level. Because you and I both know, like you said, it's a piece of glass. So what has been triggered is much, much deeper than that piece of glass. And anger often isn't just anger. It may be deep down you were really worried about your daughter, or maybe there's some kind of value attached to it. I don't know. And I do think self-compassion is a really big piece, hearing what you said. Because this is a big philosophical question, the question of free will. And my belief is a lot of the times people they are not actually in control. I don't mean to say people can't change or they are not in control of their own behavior, but sometimes people do things for a reason that we cannot see. So rather than blaming and drowning in shame or guilt, it is really important to see what was driving it. How old were you when you were, not you, just any person who had an episode or is reacting in a particular way that they don't understand? How old are they acting from? Maybe it's really the 3-year-old in them that's throwing a tantrum. And that 3-year-old doesn't need to be told off any further. It needs to be understood and nurtured. I'm not here to psychoanalyze you, so I'm not going to go into that. But using this as a really good example, I'm just sort of using it as a case study. And that would be what I think about, like, what is really happening? There are deeper layers in there. Another thing that people often miss is also the relationship dynamic. Who else is in the room? Maybe the anger is not about the china. Maybe it's about your wife not helping. I obviously.
No, I know you don't.
I don't know. It's just an example.
Anything, but yeah.
Yeah. So
that's really interesting. Now, so one thing that, because I had never been in therapy before until 2 months ago, let's say. Do
you know the kind of therapy that you're in? Is there an approach?
Well, I reached out to a specific, so I thought that perhaps I had borderline personality traits. So I reached out to a clinic that specialized in DBT, I guess. But mostly we just worked through the assessment phase. So it took, 7 or 8 weeks to just really work through all of the different assessments and then deep dive into the ones that seemed most relevant. And then, and now I'm in kind of a tracking phase where, like, every day I track, like, how much sleep did I have? How am I feeling? Is it more positive or negative on a scale? And, how many mood changes are happening during a day? And just like tracking all this stuff just to try and make sense of what's going on. But what I found most interesting was and I don't know if this is an industry thing or not, but I found it really interesting, the rationalization of actions. So one of the questions that came up is like, hey, do you trust people, right? Like, I think in the assessment they talk about, like, do you trust strangers or something like that? And I was kind of saying, like, oh, well, like, if someone's walking on my property, it really bothers me. Like having a stranger come onto my property, I will go outside and ask them what they're doing, because it's my property and it's my space. And so to me, that seems like something, my wife mentions how weird that is. Like, it's just like this weird thing Mark does, but I'm very suspicious of that. And so that to me makes me think, okay, so that's weird. But then when I explained it and I say, well, I just don't know what they're doing. And I want to know why they're on my property. It's mine. And so, I have kids and I have a dog and all of this stuff. And so it's like, I'll go out and ask them. And when I explain it like that, they'll go like, that makes sense. Like, in that moment, with that mindset, that makes sense to me. So therefore, it's a rational thing to do. I don't know if I'm actually explaining this right or not, but is that like the kind of, that seems to me the type of rational thinking where it's like, okay, if you're suspicious of someone and they come up and they say, hey, I'm reading your gas meter, and you're still suspicious of them and you think they're following you and they think that, like, that's where it starts to become a little more unhealthy, let's say.
I see. Maybe in that very context, maybe what your counselor was fishing for was some kind of paranoia. So if you can explain it in such a rational way and it seems grounded in reality, then at least they know you're not schizophrenic or paranoid schizophrenic.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't actually know what your counselor was doing based on what you've just told me.
But what you said that reminded me of this was this like, so maybe I'm asking you now, does it make sense? Like if you can explain why you feel the way you feel and knowing, okay, so if you were raised in this type of household or you experienced this type of trauma, it's only natural that you would have this type of reaction to a certain situation. So let's say that you're a woman who was physically assaulted at a younger age.
Yes.
Well, it's only natural then that you might react in a certain situation.
Completely.
And
yes.
so that was I never knew that or accounted for that. I just thought
completely. Yeah.
Yeah, but there's a little bit of freedom in knowing like, oh, okay, it makes sense for me to react this way because of these other things.
Yeah. And in that example that you just gave, well, the reasons that you gave were some kind of objective, rational reasons, but your wife may not react in the same way. And that may be because, again, I'm just making up reasons. Maybe you've always been the bigger brother in your family. Maybe you grew up in a poor, socioeconomic, in a messy household, and there were lots of risk. Strangers equal risk. Or maybe someone has stolen from you before. So you bring into your current point of life a lot of past experiences and filters. And yes, to you, it makes sense. And it's really important to know. So this is a mild example, but even when things that are really extreme, like say addiction or things that doesn't make sense to naked eyes, actually it makes sense to that person, whether they know it or not. Why would you not go and drink yourself stupid if that is actually the safest thing to do? Why would you not use alcohol to numb yourself if the pain you would otherwise feel would kill you? And we don't see these. We just go, oh, he's a drunk. Oh, he punched people. Right. But actually, that may actually be the best he could do based on the existing resources he has right now. Right. That's the only way he knows to not feel the pain that would otherwise drive him to suicide. Just as an example.
Yeah. And so I'm going to stack a few things together. I guess if we all have a past and if we all have trauma of different degrees and if we all kind of have something we're working through, I think we spend a lot of time looking for exterior validation, but no one will ever understand why we're thinking the things we think and why we're doing the things we do. Because they're busy judging us from their own lens, their own experiences, their own the drunk. Like, why don't you just stop drinking? Like, why are you doing this to yourself? Yeah. But so how do we...
I get so triggered. I get so triggered talking about these things. I used to have an... No, it's fine. It's, feeling triggered is not necessarily bad. It's just a part of human life. Okay. No, yeah, it's fine. I was just thinking about, go on, you go.
No, you're the guest. Please share.
I've forgotten now, but you were saying something.
Oh, I was just saying, how do we cross the gap? So first, I need to understand me, and then I need to give myself compassion and figure out, okay, that makes sense in that case.
And that is a big piece. Once you have real self-compassion, it actually hurts less when others judge you. It still hurts. I think it will still sting, but it won't be traumatizingly bad because you won't be drowning in shame and guilt and self-blame. At least you stand up for yourself in your own head, in your own mind.
Right. You have a reason now. You can, someone can throw it at you, but you can say, you don't even understand what I'm working through or what I've done or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
And then the next step, though, is how do we get to a place where we are then extending the same grace or belief, so that way, if we have done this work for ourselves, and because it's so easy for me to be like, I'm special, I'm the most important person in my life, I can tell you that. So I'm special, I'm important, I'm different, you don't realize how hard I have it and all of this stuff. But then if we're busy wanting all of this from everyone else, how do we get better at giving other people the very thing that we're desperate to have for ourselves?
Well, the answer goes back to what I said earlier. If you can do it for yourself, it does become easier to do it for others. It is incredibly hard, especially if it's someone that you're close to and they are doing things that trigger you. And if they are in your close proximity and they're bugging you, that is really the hardest. Breathe first. Immediately switching from anger to compassion is a really tall order. And I wouldn't say that is necessary. I'm imagining a situation where someone is doing something that bugs you. I don't know if I'm getting your question right, but I'm guessing your question is, how do you extend that compassion to someone when they are bugging you? Is that right? Or if they are...
Or just in general, how do we recognize in ourselves that the very thing that we want from others, we're not even giving to them?
Well, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't have a lot of problem extending compassion unless it triggers something in you. Unless that person represents what in psychology we call the shadow, something that you really don't want to acknowledge in yourself, or that you really reject in yourself, or that's the last thing that you want in yourself. Otherwise, it shouldn't be that difficult, if that makes sense. Like some people really have... I don't know
if I understand this shadow. What do you mean? Like, do you mean
shadow,
like a darker version of yourself?
No, shadow is aspects of your personalities that you really do not want to acknowledge. So let's say you've always been very high-strung, very hardworking, and you've identified with being a very hardworking, diligent person, and you do not want to accept that there's any bits of you that is a lazy bone. And you've always worked really hard to get to where you are. And one day you see someone lazing around, never doing anything, seems to be taking advantage of others. That person really triggers you, and you really cannot have any compassion for them. That says more about you than it says about them. Because it means there is some work you need to do with the parts in you that can also be lazy. I mean, that's my belief. In all of us, we have the capacity to be Gandhi, and we also have the capacity to be a serial killer. That really, it may sound contentious, but just in all of us, there is a capacity for evil. Let's put it that way. And our work is to acknowledge that rather than deny it, and then manage it. But denying the capacity for anger, denying that you can also be lazy, you can also be selfish, you can also be flashy, that is when it creates problem in your interpersonal world. Because then you go out and you see someone being lazy, flashy, you really hate them and you don't know why. They really get on your nerve. And that's because something in you has been triggered, and that's what we call shadow.
So a few minutes ago, you mentioned that you were being triggered, and I said, I'm sorry. And you said, no, it's not a bad thing. What was triggering you?
That was just when we were talking about people judging addiction or something. I think it reminds me of in a dating situation, I had an ex-date who said something really horrible about fat people or people who drink Coke all the time, and they really judge people who drink Coke, thinking they are lazy and they choose to drink it. And I said, well, that may have been the only thing they know to cope. And I'm triggered because that was my story. You know, when I was younger, I had used food, amongst other things, to cope with really difficult situations. So I understand how sometimes people do things against their own best will and intention, or betray themselves, but they can't help it.
You know, it's interesting. I used food. So when I was growing up in this kind of strange household, I was a growing boy. I had a large appetite. I was always super hungry. And my stepfather and my mom to a lesser degree, but my stepfather, everything was always portioned out. So it was like I was 8. And as an 8-year-old, I'm allowed to have a slice of pizza. And if I wanted more pizza, I would have to go get my allowance money and buy off of them like more pizza. Or whatever it was. And so whenever I'd go to my dad's house, my parents were separated. When I go to my dad's house, he grew up as a foster kid, and he was always hungry. So his house was stacked with food. He never wanted anyone to ever go hungry. And it was just like the freedom of being able to like eat when I wanted, what I wanted. And so when I was growing up, I remember thinking like, when I'm a grown up, I can eat whatever I want, whenever I want, because no one's going to tell me, how much to eat or whatever it is.
It's your middle finger up, isn't it?
Kind of like that, I guess. And so, up until 3 years ago, I was like 50 pounds heavier than I am now and very unhealthy and all these things. But somewhere along the way, I went, oh, you know what? Like when I used to get anxious at work, I would go out and like eat sushi for lunch or something. Like, I'm just going to do this for me. And so somewhere along the way, I was like, oh, like food doesn't mean what it used to mean to me. I only eat now in a 4-hour window. I'm more or less very strict with my diet and all these things.
You've gone to 4 hours. I'm so impressed. I've tried for years and my maximum is 8.
Really?
Yeah.
Did you do IF? Did you do
IF?
And keto at the same time?
I don't keto. I tried keto. I just can't eat that much fat.
Yeah.
So I've tried everything. I'm paleo. I'm vegan. I was paleo. I was vegan. I was pagan.
Yeah. So the only thing I would say is I can't imagine doing IF without going onto keto, because the hunger pains are just too bad. And so when you're in ketosis, you just don't, like, I don't crave sugar. You don't crave those things. But what was interesting to me, I was telling someone, I was like, oh, you know what? I don't think food has the same, like when I get stressed, I don't go to food now. And then they go, oh, what did you replace that with? And I was like, well, what do you mean? Like, what did I replace that with? And I guess, is there this thing where, like, if you're gonna stop smoking, you're gonna pick up another habit? If I'm no longer using, like delicious food to be my thing because I'm a grown up and the world is giving me anxiety, and so I'm gonna just sit down for 45 minutes and just eat the most amazing sushi in the world, which I'm getting excited about now. I haven't had it in 2 years.
Sushi is my favorite food. Now we just have sashimi because no carb. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's not as I have gone for sashimi dinners, but you can only eat 40 pieces of fish and
it is different.
Feel satisfied. But is there this like one out, one in kind of thing that I need to be more conscious, or we need to be more aware?
No. It's a common strategy. It is easy. In fact, it's very impressive if you can just get rid of it. I think for most people, it's an easier leverage to have a replacement. But if you can just get rid of the cause of the anxiety, the source of needing to binge eat, then good for you.
Well, I haven't gotten rid of the source. I don't know what I've transferred it to now when I get really anxious.
Could it be the high of creativity or your entrepreneurship?
Oh, that's interesting. I know that I'm addicted to the rush of
ketosis.
No, I was going to say like what we're doing right now, like because I'm a brand strategist and I work with organizations to help them with positioning and marketing and stuff. So
that sounds really fun.
It can be when you're trying to have a big problem and you're trying to crack the code and you're like, we did it. And so I love those moments. I live for those moments. I'm probably addicted to them, but I don't know if I did replace it with something or not, but I certainly didn't address the root cause yet. I don't think.
Freud talks about, good old Freud, talks about something called sublimation. Well, according to Freud, it's just... Real?
Or have you guys moved on past Freud in the, like, I know people reference him and stuff, but...
Both yes and no. And no. That will require long answer. But in sublimation, you could have transformed those angsty energy into art, into creativity, into your business. That would be the best kind of defense. Mm.
And these types of coping methods, these aren't cheats or anything. Like these are valid.
No.
It's not. It's still
Valid.
like if it works, it's good.
Yes, I would think so. In my approach, yes.
And then, I guess I'm trying to think how to word this now. So my initial reaction when, I'm speaking to someone who is so the first thing is, as soon as I'm speaking to anyone in your industry, I'm always marvel at the understanding, the compassion, the ability to, and of course it comes with training, and it comes with all of your experience and all of your hours as a clinician and all of those other things. But also I've noticed that there's a certain type of person who loves people so much or cares about people so much they want to go into it. And so when I hear someone say, like you mentioned, maybe that's the 3-year-old version of yourself, I go, come on. Or when someone says, well, in that moment, you may not be reacting to the moment. You're not getting upset. You're not getting upset because of the broken china cabinet. You're actually getting upset because you feel a lack of control over the fact that when you were 12 years old, blah, 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 all this stuff happens. And you're still carrying that forward. And I go, come on. Like it makes sense to me, but it feels like kind of not. It feels like we're just trying to connect some dots to make us all feel better. So
does that make you feel better, really? When I say it's your 12-year-old childhood trauma, does that make you feel better? I mean, the inner child stuff.
It feels like a soothing method. And
then it's hitting a nerve, because it's not always soothing. When I say that to people, it's hardly ever soothing. And sorry to interrupt. I mean, that's not the only angle I go into, the inner child past trauma bit. I also posit the possibilities that maybe you're actually angry at your wife and you want to hit something. Maybe you actually feel really trapped in your business and in this house, and you really want to get out of this and go to move to Florida or something. There are many other possibilities too.
But it's all. But I guess what I'm looking for is for you to defend and say this is real. Like this is not.
You want me to say this is a problem and you need to fix it and go to some anger management course?
An anger management course. I love how feisty you're getting now. It's so I believe that the reason, like my wife said, why did you get so angry at the broken china cabinet? And I told her, I said, listen, I feel like I have to work so hard for the things we have. And the kids are destroying things faster than I can fix them. Every time that something gets broken, it costs me more money. And I literally, like, every time something goes wrong, you guys are just giving me more things to do. And I'm already overwhelmed with the number of things I have to do. So, I mean, I have 4 kids, like something gets broken every week. And so if over the course of a year, like 50 things are happening, I can't keep up with, it feels like we're actually backsliding because every year that goes by, we have less and less to show for it. So maybe it's scarcity mindset. Maybe it's, I don't know. I don't know what's driving that per se.
It's also the frustration of seeming to be not that literally you're the only breadwinner, but it may feel like you're the only one who is keeping the family going in terms of materials. And that is a huge weight on your shoulder. And I don't care about the objective fact. It may be that your wife also works really hard, etc., but for you, the feeling is that it's all on you. And I think that feeling that you cannot keep up with the loss is very interesting, because that's clearly not the case. But on a feeling level, it feels like water is leaking out faster than you can refill it.
Yes. You literally just articulated what I feel daily almost.
And that feels like something that belongs to you. That feels something deeper, something that you carry, something that permeates other aspects of your life too. That feels more like a schema, a pattern.
How I guess you just hit on something. How important is pattern recognition in all of this? Like, is it important to, like,
quite important.
Can you track, like, so I mentioned, like, I track how many hours I'm sleeping right now and all of these things in the hopes that somehow we're going to be able to see something. But can you trust the pattern recognition?
Okay, well, when it comes to biohacking, that's a slightly different thing. But when it comes to my work, I think it's very important. Yeah. And I'm not always right. So I'm just constantly in the process of digging through things. It is like that key that unlocks everything. If you can spot that as a pattern and how it permeates different aspects of your lives, don't you think it's really convenient? Then you get to see, oh, okay, actually this is about that and this is about that too. And you kill many birds in one stone.
I do. And I think what you're feeling right now at this point is the duality I have between, one, I totally believe in everything about this. Like I believe in everything that you do as a profession.
I'm seeing the cynic in you that go, that's so woo-woo. This
no. I have two parts of me. I have the part of me that goes like, like I just finished reading Man's Search for Meaning, I don't know, a week or two ago. And throughout I was just like, oh my goodness, this is like revelation. Like I know that the book was written a very long time ago in the 50s, but my goodness, or 70s or whenever it was, but this is amazing. And so I can connect all of those dots. But then when we start to get to the ego and the super ego and all of these other things, I'm just like, I'm a little cynical and skeptical. And so for me, it's like, I believe people if they tell me with conviction that something's real. But if someone's kind of like, well, maybe, and it depends. And sometimes it's when I start to question it. So I want to believe that, yes, when I was 7 years old, the fact that this happened and that happened in a very short period of time, that it caused me to learn certain behaviors that I've carried through. Like I can totally get on board with that. But when it becomes, Mark, and maybe this is just me, or like, Mark, you need to talk to 7-year-old self because he's still here, and you need to realize, like, that's when it starts to take one step beyond where I go, really? And so how
what have you got to lose?
I apparently have very strong perfectionist traits. And so the thought of doing something without getting a positive outcome bothers me. Like just play. For example, like my kids used to come up to say, Daddy, can we play? And I go, I don't play. Like I'm sorry. And other parents would be like, you just told your 5-year-old boy that you're not going to play with him. And it's just like, well, I have no interest in it. I don't enjoy it. I don't like it. It's a chore. I'll do it randomly sometimes, but no, I'm not going to play with you guys. And so it's, this whole podcast just isn't about me, but yeah, it's.
No, I appreciate you using yourself as an example, because I think a lot of people resonate with what you're saying, including myself, actually, the struggle to play. The definition of play is to do something unproductive and purposeless. How?
Yeah. Maybe we're too high achievers over here who just are really uncomfortable with that.
Well, I think your biohacking is your kind of play, grown-up play. Or if you do anything for pure pleasure, that may be your play.
Yeah. And a friend did remind me the other day that like a big part of what I get to do, like, for example, what we're doing right now to me is playing. Like I so enjoy being able to connect with people who have the experiences I don't have, and so, but there is a purpose also to it. So I don't know if that counts as play.
I don't know. I'm not according to the definition of the book I read called play, I think not. But hey, we can come up with our own. I think you may struggle with something about this world of psychotherapy and psychology in that it's pretty fluid. I really struggle with my own therapist sometimes. It doesn't help that he's English and he never says anything definitively. Whenever I ask him a question, it's always maybe, could be. And as our human brain really likes certainty and categories. And when things are fluid and messy, we don't like it. But reality is fluid and messy. And duo, it's both yes and no.
That's amazing. And so if someone is struggling now, and of course, if someone is really, really struggling, then I hope they're reaching out for help or whatever. But I mean more the person who hides it well. The person where it's not quite bad enough. It's not quite painful enough. It's not quite acute enough to desperate, like, they haven't had the divorce. They haven't had a loss of a loved one. They haven't gone through a midlife crisis. It's just life's, what would be the best thing for them to start doing?
Well, I don't know, because how should I put it? If they don't think their life has a problem, who am I to tell them they have a problem? People come to me when they are hurt enough and when they have suffered enough and they have a real motivation to change. So I'm not going to go in there and say, you have a problem, you change. And if they come to me and say, I'm feeling really flat and numb, everything seems to be going well on the surface, but I'm not feeling all right inside, then I would explore, okay, you are the way you are today because something has been working. Some kind of strategy was serving you all these years. And yet what has got you here is not going to get you there. Maybe you end, and people come to me in their midlife, and I define midlife very loosely. It could be a quarter life crisis too. So they reach a point where they want to enter the second half of their life, where it's actually more about meaning rather than all the things, the ego striving that they have been working towards. And that's when all the strategies that they have been using are no longer working. And that hiding may be a part of it. All their life they may have been this stoic, I don't mean stoicism stoic, but, just in a general sense, very unvulnerable, go-getter outlook, and everyone thinks of them as strong. But maybe deep in their hearts, they're really yearning to be more congruent, more vulnerable, and more open in the world. And getting from A to B is hard. But that person has to really realize what has been working, has served them, and so they don't beat themselves up for them the way they are. But there's also room to explore for new possibilities. And it can feel risky at first. That's why mini steps.
Mini steps. Wasn't that a conversation? You made it through. Okay, 3 key takeaways for me. Number 1, the right situation can push us to a limit that we didn't even know we had. Number 2, don't judge people if you don't understand what they're going through. And honestly, how can we understand what anyone is going through? And number 3, try to understand what's driving your reactions in the different situations you find yourself. Remember, those of us who have something to prove can show ourselves and the world that we have what it takes to make it happen. But you have to think big. You've got to be bold, and you must say yes. If you need more inspiration, you've got to hear from the mom turned 18 times Ironman and Eco Challenge Fiji competitor, Sonia Wick. Click on the link right over there.
That continued to light me up for a lot of years as I ran around trying to get that done. And then I didn't win, I got second, but it felt like I won because second's really close to first.